This is an extract from the Leader Coronavirus Daily podcast by the Evening Standard and hosted by me, David Marsland. To hear the whole thing, search for it on your podcast provider. Last week on this podcast, London Mayor Sadiq Khan said the furlough scheme had to go on long after the UK comes out of lockdown.
It is the case those who work in pubs, those who work in culture, those who work in the creative industries won't be able to come out of lockdown as quick or have their lockdown eased. And for them, there will need to be support in the longer term.
But it can't continue forever. Taxpayers are meeting the wages of 6.3 million people. The cost is around £8 billion. The Chancellor says it's heading towards the same budget as the NHS. The Evening Standards revealed the government's now looking at ways to taper off the subsidy, perhaps starting with reducing it from 80% of an employee's wage to 60%. Our editorial column says furlough has been a victim of its own success.
Here's a problem that governments don't often have. A policy is too popular and too successful. But there is a problem. Indeed, there are two problems. The first is cost. The lockdown is set to last longer than those at the heart of the government had assumed when they announced it back in March. There is also a second problem, which few dare to talk about yet, but which the Treasury knows must be addressed. Many of those on furlough will return to their jobs as economic activity is allowed to slowly restart and businesses recover. Sadly, however, many others will not be able to go back to their old jobs. For now, these problems can be held off, but it speaks to the Chancellor's honesty and good sense that he is preparing the public for the end of furlough. The new Chancellor is about to find out that handing out money is the easy part of the job. Taking it away is a lot harder.
Well, those most dependent on the furlough scheme are the small firms, many of which are struggling to keep going while customers are stuck in their homes. Joining me now is Craig Beaumont from the Federation of Small Businesses. If the government goes ahead with cutting furlough from 80 to 60%, Craig, how could that affect your members?
Well, small firms must be allowed, we think, to get back on their feet one step at a time. You know, we employ 16 million people. It's a difficult situation because there's this huge amount of government funding that's gone into the furlough scheme, which was really welcome. It has saved millions of jobs, so absolute credit where it's due. The risk of the cliff edge coming out of that is a significant problem. But we've also, even during the early stages of this furlough, picked up there are some few issues that are not being flexible enough. So what we are saying to government right now is to say that, can you let furloughed staff back to work a small proportion of their contracted hours as work comes in? Could they have a few hours where they could do things like quote for contracts for future work? Could they process payments that are needed to get out to other businesses, especially small businesses? That kind of thing where there isn't enough to justify a full job, but could you allow that flexibility? I'm not sure it works with a simple, let's just reduce the 80% to 60%. I don't think that sounds to me like a very fair way of doing it. It should be based on the employer seeing what work needs doing and then bringing people back.
If furloughing did suddenly stop, now it doesn't look like this is going to happen, but if it did, what would be the impact on small businesses?
Well, there'd be a huge impact. I think there'd be an instant impact on all businesses where businesses aren't sure if they can come back. You've got major companies up to massive sizes not sure if they can come back and when. And that will trigger the redundancy consultations. So because they've spent so much money on these schemes, which is very, very welcome, if they suddenly turn the taps off, you could have the economy come to a juddering halt and actually head into an instant recession. When in fact, what we really want is this V-shaped recovery, a bounce back. And you need those companies and people in these furloughed roles to be in place and ready to reactivate. Otherwise, you can't bounce back. So that temptation from government to pull back support has got to be resisted. And I think it is. It's an instant kind of response to spending a lot of money, is to work out how to stop spending a lot of money. But that's not the right approach here. And I don't think the government will end up going that way.
But that leads to what I admit is quite a difficult question, Craig. But how long should furloughing go on for?
I think if you're looking at the whole economy, I think you should tack it across to how the economy recovers. So at the moment it's June. I think there's a very strong case that says that you should look for the sectors that are officially closed, you keep the full furlough scheme going for as long as that closure exists. And that's because of health advice. Now, for the rest of the economy, you can take a different approach and you can say, right, your workplace can now start coming back. The economy is beginning to recover. Let's reduce the amount of money going into furlough and allow a staggering return of the workforce. I think that's the right way to go. Now, how long that lasts? Well, it depends to some massive degree on the health advice that comes in. If it's not safe to do so, businesses should not open.
What about staff, though, Craig? People may be having to take another pay cut on top of the one they've just had to accept, perhaps looking at other opportunities elsewhere where they can get more money. Is it going to be difficult for small businesses to retain their workforce as furloughing continues?
I think that's a natural response to coming back. We've seen a depression in, obviously, the housing market. You've seen a depression in activity around recruitment. So many people haven't wanted to move jobs, so that has been stopped. So people are staying in jobs. You've, even with the furlough scheme, had people who have left places, joined somewhere new, and then been let go, returning to their old employer. And the government has said that is fine. The old employer can take you back on and put you in the furlough scheme. So you keep going. You've seen people do temporary jobs while they've been furloughed, and that's great too, but maybe they'll have ideas of doing new things. I think you've got innovation hitting right across. So, I know businesses where the different people within the business have done different things. So you might furlough a portion of the workforce, but then you mix up the responsibilities of those people who are still in work. And people might try something new and like it. So I think there's naturally going to be a change when we come back. And I don't think that's anything to be feared. I think that is a natural human reaction to coming back.
Search for the Leader Coronavirus Daily on any podcast provider to hear more from the podcast.